Hello, everyone, and welcome to True Crime Paranormal. I'm your host, Josh Turner. This is TCP. Welcome to the True Crime Reality. I got that from Paranormal Roundtable. In case you don't know, I'm the host of Paranormal Roundtable, and we always say PRT, which is Paranormal Roundtable. Join us in the real reality. So here we are. This is our second case we're going to cover. All right, third episode, second case. I hope everybody enjoyed the Ed Gein, but now we're moving on. And this is about another guy named Chris Watts, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to get into it with my host, Nellie. She's here with me tonight.
Hello.
And Madeline.
Hi, everyone.
And Rain.
Hey.
So Anthony's here in the studio. He's doing the technical stuff here, but he's not going to really be participating because he's just not good at things, you know. I'm joking. I'm kidding. No, he's good at a lot of things. He's my host on Paranormal Roundtable, and he does a lot of the technical things. Him and Tony Mushu, they are my hosts on the other show. So if you don't know what that is, check it out. Paranormal Roundtable is on pretty much every other day that this isn't on. It's on Mondays. We do a call-in show. Anybody can get on and tell their encounters, or we'll talk. We'll have a panel. We'll just sit around and talk about science, cryptids, ghosts, UFOs, whatever. It runs the gamut, and alternate realities comes up a lot, the nature of reality. And then Tuesdays is our Patreon. Join the Patreon. A Paranormal Roundtable's $10, $20, $30, $40, $50 tier, and you get a merchandise bag. We call it the swag bag after 2 months, and then every 6 months after that, you get an updated swag bag, and we love to give away merch. And, a lot of people have enjoyed the Patreon, and they've really been enjoying it. On Tuesdays, we've been doing Bigfoot and the nature of reality, state by state. We've done Arkansas. We've done New Mexico. We've done Louisiana. We've done Oklahoma. And it just goes on and on. It's going to keep going. And we don't just do Bigfoot. Like, we'll get into other cryptids and encounters of things that people have seen, weird anomalies like UFOs and ghosts, in those same vicinities if it's near or around the areas that these Bigfoot have been seen. And you'd be surprised at the variety of Bigfoot and what they are and how many people have seen them. So Wednesdays, we retell people's encounters. And then on Thursday, it's on a live stream, YouTube. Thursday is members only on YouTube for Paranormal Roundtable. And you go, it's $5 and you get 1 week, you get a live stream. And then the next week you get a pre-record, and it just alternates, and that's for members only on Thursdays. Friday, we have a guest. We always have a guest on Fridays, and we just interview them, or I don't say interview, we discuss it. We have discussions with these experiencers who have seen anything from ghosts to Bigfoot to UFOs, Dogman, whatever, and they'll come on and retell their encounters, and we'll go over it with them. And then Saturdays is Wildcard Saturday. We might do a show, we might not. It might be a live stream, might be an hour-long pre-record. Those are usually an hour long, and that's all after True Crime Paranormal, which obviously, if you listen to this, is at 7 o'clock on a Saturday. And then on Sunday, that's the main show, pretty much, where we tell people's encounters, and that tends to be like the show that everybody tunes in for. But Wednesday is starting to become, starting to rival it with a number of people in the chat and views. So let's get into it. Right now, this case here is something that my co-hosts have said made them feel very emotional. Anybody has children or is a husband or a wife or a mother or a father, you would feel some sort of emotional, toward this case. It's going to be very hard, folks, to listen to. And some of this is going to be graphic. This is not intended for children, okay? This is not intended for children. And I always have to say this is for entertainment purposes only. And we are not trying to promote any ideals or whatever. What we say are our opinions. And that's it. I gotta make that disclaimer because we do get into the paranormal, and it can be argued that some of this is absolutely the case. But then again, a lot of it is theory and conjecture, and we're postulating on theories. So I got to make that disclaimer that, we're talking about some very sensitive uh, subject material. So I want to get into this case, and this one is going to be a little bit difficult for all of us, I guess. Having read over a lot of the details, I am shocked and appalled that people like this walk the earth and exist. You have a contrast between people like this and someone like Geen, who could be argued that he was like completely removed from what he was doing and maybe demonically possessed. And then there are people who it's almost like they willingly welcome it and they know full well what they're doing. They're watching this happen to themselves and they're doing nothing to stop it, to fight it. And that could be argued with this guy in this case here. And there were other people involved. And we're going to get into those people and who they are and what they may or may not have been involved in doing. But yeah, was there witchcraft involved? Was there demonic possession, obsession, right? Or was it just an evil madman who just wanted to do dark deeds? So let's get into this. We'll start with you, Maddie. What do you know about this individual?
So this is Christopher Watts. Some of you may be familiar with him. This happened back in 2018, so it wasn't that much. So it wasn't too long ago. He murdered his pregnant wife and sadly his two daughters as well, Shannon and Bella and Celeste Watts. As far as everything we know about Christopher, he was born in Lafayette, North Carolina, May 17th, 1985. Very traditional working class family. His parents were Baptists. He grew up in the church, was described as very non-confrontational, good loving home. He had one sibling, a sister named Jamie. So quite a contrast from our last episode with Ed Gein, who had a very abusive, domineering mother, was isolated from reality. Here it was quite the opposite. He was a good student, very quiet, was in a lot of sports, never got into trouble, never did drugs, never drank, just did everything he could to stay out of trouble. One thing that was interesting that I came across reading about him was his mom would often find him just praying, just kind of, I don't want to say obsessively, but kind of where he was just constantly asking God for forgiveness and repentance. Like it kind of developed, that fundamentalist Baptist upbringing seemed to have like bred this fear of, damnation and going to hell, which as we move on to talk about his crimes and what he did, it kind of makes you wonder, was his upbringing kind of what kept him from acting out whatever it is that might have been wrong with him from the jump, if that makes sense.
So when I first saw Chris Watts, it was a viral thing online. It was in 2018. And so I was watching this all play out in real time. And, I first saw him and he was being interviewed by the news on his front porch. And I'm seeing him and he's telling the world that his wife and his two little girls are missing. His pregnant wife, Shanann, she was 15 weeks pregnant. And he's rocking back and forth. He's covering his chest with his arms. He seems to be smirking and laughing at times. And I'm just looking at him like, where are the tears? Like, if this was me and my family, I would be in stitches. Like, I can't even imagine having to go through that. And here I am crying about these people missing more than he is. The math wasn't mathing with that guy. So the day of Shanann going missing, her friend, and what a good friend, because really, she was the reason why I think that he was caught so quickly, was because of her. She put a stop to his sick, twisted, selfish, plan. So her friend had been calling her all morning. She's not answering. She knew something was wrong. She said she felt something was wrong. She drove to the house. She gets there. There's nobody home. There's no lights on. She doesn't see the little girls in the window running around. She knew something was going on. She tries to call Chris at work. So about 12:15, he arrives. The police are already there. They he grants the police access to go in, and her friend is just horrified. The lights are off. There's her cell phone's left there. She has lupus. Her medication is still there, and he is just doesn't seem to even be looking for her, in my opinion. And so,
Completely unfazed.
yes, so now all of this is recorded. Okay, there's going to be anywhere you look, you can look at this up. It's police body cam footage. And so when I'm watching the police body cam footage of Next, when I'm looking into this in real time in 2018, the police go into the house and I see there's a staircase to the left, and I see like a little girl running up the stairs, but it's like translucent almost. And so, but the police don't seem to notice anything on the stairs. So I'm like, okay, maybe that was just me. Maybe I'm just saw something I didn't see, you
And this
know?
was on television?
Yes, yes. So So then the police go in. They had a canine unit. The canine winds up picking up a scent in the basement, which we can get into later, my speculative theories on that. And so the two police officer women, they go upstairs and you just see this beautiful house of Shanann. She Shanann Watts, she just really you could tell she put so much time and energy into her home. It was just immaculate. It was clean. It was just you could just tell how much love she really had by the way she kept her home. And even the two police officers, when they go upstairs into the room in the closet, they even are that you can hear them on this police body cam footage talking to each other about how everything is so organized. But then you hear giggling, a little girl's laughter in the closet. So undeniable. They've already searched the house, there's nobody there, but the police officers heard it as well because they say something to each other on this footage and they say, "Did you hear that? That's weird." And so when you keep going further into this body cam footage and you're seeing his mannerisms, the way he's acting is just off. And then they go down in the basement and you hear, "Help me," as a whisper. And so, I've always been interested in the paranormal, of course. And so this really I was just so invested in this. I was just felt sick to my stomach because Shanann recorded her whole life on Facebook. So maybe cases like Ed Gein, it's all word of mouth. It's what people said happened. But in this case, with the way that technology is and social media, you almost get to feel like you know somebody by their online presence whenever everything's filmed. Every birthday party, pregnancy announcements, her whole work revolved around social media. And so seeing Shanann and hearing those little girls' voices, Bella and Cece, it just broke me. It really did. And it's just a very haunting case that I hope we can get to the bottom of.
I think that whenever you look at, and that's a good point, the contrast between like let's just use Ed Gein as the example. because we just did his story, and it's a very it's been very popularized in fiction, horror, things like that, and it's real easy for people to you kind of disassociate from the victims because you don't know the victims, you know a little bit about who they were, whatever. But it's almost like, okay, yeah, they're just names and it's not the same. It doesn't have the same punch to the gut that something like this with this Chris Watts case, because like you said, it was all over social media. You had the little girls, you know what their voices sounded like, you know what they looked like, you know what the wife looked like, what her voice sounded like. Whereas you didn't really have that with some of these other people who were killed. Even going back to, like, let's say Dahmer's cases and Gacy, which were a lot more recent than what Gein did. You still don't have that media. Like, a lot of times you'll just see the victims as like newspaper clippings of their picture, that was given to the police with, this is what they look like. They went missing, you know. So yeah, this does have a lot more punch than, like, say, Bundy or Gacy and Gein, but it's still sad. It's tragic, no matter who it is or what they've done. But this one really hits home, and it's really hard to take because as evil as Gein, Gein may have killed his brother, but as hard as it is to take with like Dahmer, they didn't kill their family members. I mean, there's some things that were sacred even to them, but this guy actually, he did what he did to his own wife and little children and his own unborn child. Like, it takes something really awful to go into that.
And I think what Rain was saying, what makes it so unnerving, because Shanann did have such a strong online presence because of the nature of her job, which she was in marketing, was that they seemed like this picture-perfect family. So you could imagine just how it was like for the people that were in their lives, their friends, their family, to find out that Chris was responsible for this, the one who was supposed to love and protect them, just took them out and threw them out like trash.
Yeah. Very, very good point.
Literally, that's what he did. Threw them away like trash.
And Rain, I have a question. So we all have seen well, not all, I said, but some people may not know about the Chris Watts case, but if you watch the police footage, which is all over the place, and you said you saw it on TV, like, I guess in real time. I watched, like, the replays on the internet, but he doesn't seem to be interested. It's like, oh, well, they disappeared, that they'll be back. And I guess he was hoping that maybe it would just go away, and maybe one day people just give up, and then he can move on with his life and be with, what was it, his mistress that he wanted?
Yes, all of this over a 6-week affair he had with a woman he worked with.
Oh my gosh.
6 weeks.
And we don't really know Nicole Kissinger, right?
Yes, Nicole Kissinger was her name.
Yeah.
Or is her name.
He's a very infamous last name, considering that Henry Kissinger was a very prominent person in our politics for years. I dislike Kissinger. Don't know Nicole Kissinger, but I'm talking about Henry. But I don't know her or her dad. But from what I read, her dad was a police detective that kind of, I mean, and the thinking is that he shielded her from this.
Oh, yes. Yes, you can clearly see and this is my opinion, on the police interrogation videos, they dropped the ball and he was running the interrogation. Like, he was not letting the police do their job. And then there was even some parts where she was telling the police, like, "Oh no, don't call Jim. Nope, he doesn't have." And then they never dotted those I's and crossed those T's. So they even caught her in lies and never went back to, try to question her on her lies. And it's all because Chris right away took the plea deal where they said, okay, if you admit what you did, and then we'll go ahead and take the death penalty off the table. So right away, he admitted it. And then that was it. They were done spending the money on it because they already had their unaliver. They already had their guy that was going to go down for this crime. And, it's just, there's so many people now that there's an online movement that are kind of like even with the Gypsy Rose. There's these online detectives, these armchair, detectives that are invested in this and they want justice for Dee Dee, Gypsy's mom. And you have the same movement here today with Nicole Kessinger. There's people that are calling it out and saying this is bull. And she's hated. She's actually went into witness protection program, it's rumored. And there's evidence of that because there is in the files, she had requested to have her name changed to the FBI and the police. And she hasn't been seen, but they recently spotted her at a funeral last year and somebody got film of her, and she has of course moved. She's in a different state with a new name and she looks like she's gained some weight, but boy, would I love to get her up on the stand and give her the third degree.
Yeah. So her name was Kessinger, not Kissinger, but same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Same
the
thing.
same. Yeah, well, I'm not going to get into it, but it's an ambiguous thing that I'm not going to. But so names, though, do mean a lot. I mean, and you see certain people in some certain, whatever. So how much do
Yeah,
we
so
know of her
actually
involvement?
her name, Kessinger, if you look into it, it's kind of like it means cheesemaker. And then the Spanish word of it is Cazo, Kaizo, or I don't know how to say it. But anyways, that means like a ladle or a saucepan. And Kissinger's actually, the origin of it means someone bad in Bavaria. And so when I start getting into this, with her and her involvement in this and the spiritual and the paranormal aspect, because I think it really comes in with her to the mistress, right? And you'll see she was feeding him. And so that was her name, Ladle, right?
Mm.
Food maker. She's feeding his ego. She's feeding him what he wants to hear. She's feeding him these ideas of how to do the unalivings. And she's feeding him sexually because he was not sleeping with his wife and he was left the marriage. He had his spiritual opening through adultery and started having this, like Maddie said, this 6-week-long affair, which is just unthinkable. A 6-week-long affair is what led you to unalive your family?
Yeah, in this book I read, and Rain, you recommended it to me, Letters from Christopher, The Tragic Confessions of the Watts Family Murders. It was written by a woman who had reached out to him while he was in prison, Sherilyn Cadle. And in this book, he doesn't go into depth, but he mentions that his mistress, Nicole Kessinger, that they were into some dark things, but he never really elaborates on what those dark things does, which I know, Rain, you looked extensively into some of the ties she had with what we
Yes.
believe to be like witchcraft, occult, those types of things.
Yes. So she admitted she has had a spiritual advisor. She would give him these teas that he thought had like a funny taste. And this is from, interrogation videos, and there's letters, the book you're speaking of, there's cellmates that have been turning in things that he said in prison. And so he admits these weird tasting teas, so I'm thinking, I know you've heard of women who will take menstrual blood to do some kind of a ritual and have men drink and eat it. So then that begged that question for me. And then this whole situation of how this whole affair started was obsession. She was obsessed with him. She Googled, now remember, the crimes are in 2018. Okay. They worked together. Okay. At a company called Anadarko, which has to do with oil. And she Googled him in 2000, or searched him. Maybe it was Google, maybe not. She searched him in 2017. His wife's name and his name. And then they met. Supposedly, they started the affair in June of 2018. The unalivings happen in August. What a short time for all this to happen. And she had this spiritual advisor. Now, people are speculating, and she has some connection to, and Josh, maybe you know about this, OTO, the Order of Templi Orientis. It's something to do with Aleister Crowley and his teachings, okay? And it's about manifesting what you want. Go for what you want. Like, it has an emphasis on sexual energy. They utilize crystals. Now, when the police were searching through the house, they found a crystal underneath Cece, the daughter's bed. I thought that was just strange because, Shanann, she loved those girls equally, for one. Why would there be a crystal under one of their bed and not the other if that was something she was going to do? So then I'm like, And then she had admitted, Nicole Kessinger had admitted she had been in the house twice. So she had access to do that. And, we can get into it later about the crystal thing and more on that. But Nicole, even when you look at her interrogation videos, okay, and what she did when she was interrogated was she deleted all her text messages, okay, and went to the police. And then in her search history, she was Googling in between the unalivings and then the 3 days later where she actually went to the police herself and then they interrogated her. She was searching if it's possible to get deleted messages. Well, newsflash, everyone. Yes, they can. And so she also told her friend to delete the messages, anything to do about him. And so I'm wondering, was her friend the spiritual advisor? Was her friend the one telling her, to do the crystal and the teas? And I don't know, but we'll get into it.
So that's a lot to unpack. Okay. Let's start with this. You mentioned something about her maybe being a part of the Order of the Templi Orientis.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the order. It's called Ordo Templi Orientis, and what that is, it was founded in the early 20th century, and it was Aleister Crowley. Man, what is he known for? A whole lot. I can't even get into one of the most notorious things. He called himself the Beast and the evilest man on earth. He was responsible for a lot of dark things, and this is one of the things and most telling things for me personally. he claims that he helped to win World War II for the British. And that is really odd. That's weird. But he was known as a very evil and dark man. But he said that he was part of it was said that he was part of a dark coven of witches that worked around the clock to stop the Germans from taking over, So he's, lauded as this hero. So he never really gets punished for all the things that he supposedly has done, not the least of which is supposedly the slaughter of innocents, which is the taking of the life of a baby. He claims that that was the most potent magic. He also talks about anal sex and other disgusting and dark things. Definitely he was bisexual, and he enjoyed sex with men and women and was just a degenerate, disgusting person, So that shows you where the British government was, and all that. But yeah, but they were the good guys, right? So, anyways, it says that he was known for having these wild orgies and parties, right? And it's weird how this case kind of reminds me of one of the stories that we covered, somebody's encounters. I mean, it was the woman Beatrice, and she was talking about her husband Stephen, who cheated on her repeatedly and had gone to a wild orgy with this woman that he was cheating with, and he may or may not have drank blood, right? and then if people that watch Paranormal Roundtable, you'll remember he said he drank blood, and then this wolf-like entity starts showing up in the house, and eventually Steve, a few months after they move into this house, he's dead. And so her dad couldn't stand him, and her dad believes that he was a dark energy soul person, and that, and by her dad's own admission, this is this other case, right? I'm talking about the parallel here. He believed that Steve would have done something to her and the children if he had not been praying hedge of protection over them daily. That was what
Wow.
James had said. James said that. He was very adamant. And I talked to his daughters and his grandchildren, and they all said this. It's a very interesting case. But and if you're keeping up with that, it's been a couple of weeks. We've gone back and talked about the house when they were children. There was this vampiric entity, and then later this wolf-like thing that showed up also in tandem with this other thing when they moved back, when Beatrice and her husband and children moved back into the house later in life. And then eventually, because they had rented it out to another family who experienced some of the weird things. One of the things that house did too was cause a lot of strife between the people living in it. And I think that happens a lot in these places. So let's get back to this. If she is into this dark stuff, as he says, her and her friends, okay, and let's say, for argument's sake, that she is into the Templia Orientis, there are some things about this organization that people may or may not know. We'll start with membership. The organization has this initiatory and an ecclesiastical part. Those are two different parts. The initiatory part is called Mysteria Mystica Maxima. And then there's the Ecclesiasta Gnostica Catholica, right? So it's kind of like an inverted Catholic teachings, right? They're like, it's like weird. It's the way that they do this thing. It was heavily influenced by Aleister Crowley, who became its leader, and it was Thelemic. Now, if anybody knows who Thelema was, that was a demon that he had, or an angel, as he called him, that he had communicated with. And if you look at this thing, it looks like a large, bald-headed gray, but with like a really large, bulbous head. And that is this entity that gave him all this information. And he plays it off like this thing was giving him some kind of, like almost divine information. But the order of the law is important to them. But the law is do what thou wilt, right? So it's a very satanic order. Another thing that Crowley was very into was he always said he didn't want to offend God. But make no mistake, his God was the God of this world. That's the one that runs this matrix, right? He did not care less. He could care less about, or he couldn't care less about Christ and the Father of Christ. That was not God to him. God to him was the one that runs this matrix. So he was like, "Oh, I don't want to offend God," which is bizarre. And another little tidbit: he owned Boleskine Castle at one time, which is in Loch Ness, and he claims to have done satanic rituals there and whatever. And then later, I think it was it Robert Plant? You might want to look that up. Robert Plant, I think, was the one that from Led Zeppelin later claimed to be a very haunted place and a portal, which is maybe why Nessie goes in and out of reality. Maybe that's why we don't see it all the time. I don't know. But it's a giant sea lizard or sea monster. And I know that Leviathan plays a very prominent role in these some of these rituals. This Babylonian Talmudic magic, apparently Leviathan is a part of that. So yeah, I've had to look into that recently.
Isn't that like a water beast
Yeah,
too?
it's a water beast. Yeah, which would make sense that Loch Ness.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it kind of goes in time with it. Having been recently accused of being a Leviathan worshiper by a hillbilly redneck with an IQ of 2, I had to actually do some research and look into it and then go, wait, what is that? Because I knew that was like a direction in Satanism and that it was a water beast in the Bible. But once I started looking into what that was, it's interesting that this particular former lawman knew so much about that, which was interesting. But you never know. People, and he is a staunch Southern Baptist, so there you go. Chris Watts, staunch Southern Baptist. Jimmy Page, that's right. Well, I knew Plant was a part of that because he was Led Zeppelin. But Jimmy Page, he purchased Boleskine Castle, and they did rituals there too, copying the Templi Orientis. And we could talk about Templi Orientis and all these other organizations and whatever until the cows come home. What we're talking about now is Chris Watts. But how this pertains to him, okay, so earlier you said that there was like this video footage, I haven't seen it, of a small child on the stairs. Then in the basement, there's this EVP that says, "Help me." And then there's a child's laughter in the bedroom. And this is all from the police
body cam footage,
cams?
yes. And at the time that occurred, I mean, unfortunately, the girls and their mother were already deceased, so there's literally no way it could have been them.
But like Rain said, she didn't know at the time when she first saw it.
Right.
And a lot of people saw that and did not know, right? Now, in the book, Chris claims that he's haunted by them, doesn't he?
Yes, he talks about that. And interestingly enough, he mentions seeing these 2 red-eyed demonic entities that took the form of his maternal grandparents when he was first taken to prison. And he talks about how he believes that he felt God's hand remove these demons off of him when he prayed earnestly. But keep in mind, this book came out and these letters that he was writing to this woman, Sherilyn, it all happened right after he was sentenced. So that's why I kind of not took it with a grain of salt, but I was very cautious in reading it not to let it completely allow me to believe, oh, he changed, because from what we can tell now, he just last year on the news, he started blaming it all on his mistress and then saying all these things about women being harlots, and then even tried shifting the blame to his wife as if it was her fault. It still doesn't explain, or it doesn't excuse by any means what he did. And in some letters that were found by a person that's been following the case and been looking at letters that are written to him, he describes what happened as, oh, I was a good husband, I was a good father, but things happened. And, now I'm not a good husband, a good father. Like, one thing I noticed even when reading this, he seemed more preoccupied with his good guy image. Because like I said, He was never in trouble. Everyone saw him as very polite, mild-mannered. So no one really saw this coming. He was just very avoidant and non-confrontational. So it was hard to imagine that he would be capable of such violence. But it's kind of interesting what you mentioned earlier about this other woman, Beatrice, how her dad did not like her husband, who's now
Not at
deceased.
all.
Not at all. And he believes that him praying over them offered a hedge of protection from him. Whereas Chris, despite growing up as, a fundamentalist Baptist,
And
didn't.
so did this guy.
Yeah, he didn't take his family to church. So that's one thing he talks about. He wishes he did. He didn't raise them in any type of religion, which I think kind of just left him more susceptible to getting involved in this affair, and even more so with a woman who was into some dark things. And given just everything that we're seeing from him, I think he's a psychopath. I don't think he has any remorse over what he did. This is just my opinion. I believe he just is more bothered by just the way he's perceived, which is why to this day it seems he's still trying to find a way to just shift responsibility onto everyone else but himself.
I totally agree. He is a narcissistic psychopath. And so it's so interesting that you said that, Josh, that because I didn't know this. When you were talking about the OTO, the order, you were saying like Crowley's teachings about anal sex. Okay. August 12th, there was a phone call. This is the day before the unalivings. There was a phone call between Chris Watts and Nicole Kessinger. And immediately after that phone call, her search history, she searches how to prepare for anal sex.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. And then if she was feeding him blood, I mean that's a very potent way for women to. This is going to be disgusting, but in Latin America and in Africa, and in very underdeveloped countries in particular, it's a very common practice for women to use menstrual blood in magic, and in particular to help them get a man to fall in love with them and marry them. I've talked to men who, one was a guy, it was, when we did the show, it was about Italy. There was a guy that told me he was the brother of one of the women that had, if y'all remember that she was living in a house that she didn't realize had been a barracks during the Italian Wars, the Napoleonic Wars. And she actually found like the people had been entombed in the wall. I don't know if we remember that story. And she was having all kinds of weird stuff happen in her villa where she was living. It was in Italy. And so she was talking about how there were women, these striga, these witches, Italian witches, that would use pasta dishes. It was very common. And you could go to these people. She's like, they were on every corner. You could go to them and they would give you the pre-prepared kit on how to get a husband. And she thinks that her brother, or no, her former brother-in-law, who was married to a woman before he married her sister, that happened to him. And that he was living in New Jersey, and a woman did that to him. And the reason he knows is because it was like he fell under this spell. He goes, and not to be mean, but guys are they're very superficial in a lot of ways when it comes to the woman's physically attractive. That's important. And this woman, he goes, she wasn't. He goes, I wake up one day and remember, this is a New Jersey guy, right? He goes, I wake up one day and next to an ogre. She's an ogress. And I look at her and I'm like, what is this? A Skeksis? Why am I laying in bed with this woman? Her nose is the size of Rhode Island, Long Island. He said, he literally told me this. I talked to him briefly. And it wasn't enough of a story to really go, like, to put it on the show, but it was funny. And so I talked to him and he says, my sister, she always said, she's like, she's ugly. What do you see in this broad? And I'm like, I don't know. And then the spell is broken. He starts, I go to church and she stops going, other than like the Easter Mass and Christmas Eve. And he's like, then eventually he goes, I find out from her sister, who blurts it out during an argument on the phone, which I was eavesdropping, he said. And she's like, you freaking, the C word, you're so dumb. You had to go to a striga to get a husband. So then he confronts her, and he ends up putting his hands on her, and she files charges, and he goes to jail. He's in there for 2 months, but then he ends up getting out, whatever. And she doesn't file any charges. On the stipulation is that he doesn't leave her. So he says, okay, and he basically lies and tells her, yeah, and then leaves her. Then she tries to run and go file charges, but this time when he got the lawyer involved, the lawyer was able to pick it apart and be like, oh, she let him out, but then went after him once he left her, and then he was able to get away. And then they were able to prove that she had at least not physically it was an infidelity, but that she was messing around with another guy online. So it was probably happening, but they couldn't prove that, hey, this was infidelity, but that was enough to get him off. But man, he went through hell. And when she said something on Facebook about how to make a man fall in love with you through marinara sauce.
Ew.
Yeah. Yep. And supposedly she did it. And then when a year later, when they started fighting about the kids and stuff like that, who were almost old enough to choose for themselves, and they chose him. One of the children said, yeah, mom is a witch and openly practices magic. And this child told everybody that she's like, you're talking about him looking like his dad and whatever. And she's like, you're just like your father. He couldn't stop stuffing his face. And that's how he ended up in the situation he was in the first place. So in other words, she basically admitted to the 16-year-old son that he was a fat dude, and that's what. And when I talked to him, he's like, I'm a little chubby. I'm not even that fat, but who doesn't like to eat pizza and, like rigatoni? But apparently that's what she did. She used her cycle to get him.
Gross.
And you are sitting there going like, dude. So that's a very common thing in some of these places. And apparently it is in Italy, because I was told that was a thing where you go to these strigas and they would use blood magic to help you land a man. So guys out there, if you're going over to a woman's house and she's cooking for you, I would say stay away from the red sauce. I mean, it's a very vile, disgusting thing, but it is a real thing. It's very real, and I'm not even joking. You don't know her, don't do it.
Ugh.
Do not do it. So that's the thing. I mean, I have a friend of mine who's got a very loving, beautiful wife, and he goes, "So I don't have that problem," because we were talking about this one day. He goes, "She can't cook." So I said, "That don't mean nothing. Don't let her bring home some potluck, something from a whatever, I don't know." But I've had people tell me all kinds of stuff like that, dude. On doing the show Paranormal Roundtable. I think that the fact that her search history had that in there, and that is considered to be a way that has a lot of powerful magical connotation. You hear that a lot with this, whatever, because of this. I guess it's some sort of foul energy that's released if you're doing like this ritual magic. I know that people that do these things, that sex is very prominent in this. And it sounds like she was trying to get her hooks into someone to, and his children and his wife were in the way.
She was completely obsessed with him and the idea of him. Her search history, even right before the unalivings, she was looking up wedding dresses.
And again, reminder, folks, this was a 6-week affair.
Yes, so she was just so obsessed with him. She was searching Shanann, so just constantly. In the voicemail she would leave him, she would, it was kind of like a gypsy thing, right? So she's on the interrogation videos talking normally, but then here she is calling him with this like creepy evil laugh, and she's like,
Oh,
"Hey, I miss you.
Ew.
so it's like
Call
Gypsy
me."
Rose.
Yes, she was
Yeah, that's
leaving
what
him
you're
these
thinking.
voicemails. I think she's just so obsessed with him, she would have done anything to get him to herself.
Wow. And that means removing 3 children, 2 that were born and one that was in the womb to
Nico.
do it. This doesn't
His
matter.
name was Nico, the baby boy.
So it was a little boy.
And he had talked about wanting a son too, but he was just taken over by this affair that even when he went with his wife to the ultrasound, he was very cold and just irritated, and she was just so excited to be giving him his first son, and he was just very just cruel towards her.
And and we talk about the different demons that can come between people in marriages, and of course we talked about Asmodeus, or Asmodeus, depending on how you pronounce it, say it, whatever. He was one that's very prominent, and the destruction. He comes up a lot when it comes to marriages and things like that. I have a story that I've told on PRT, and I'll tell it here. But I don't think he's the only one. I don't. I think that there is another, and that's Lilith. The Lilitu is a race of beings, but Lilith is the one that we hear about in the Hebrew text. Stemming from Samaria, the Lilitu is a female vampiric entity that destroys children and goes after children in the womb. And if you notice, there's a feminist movement with a lot of women, the Lilith Fair. They love to read that. And it's basically the name Lilith. It means like, rebellion and whatever. I mean, it's very obvious that that's what this is. And I am a Christian. I follow Christ. And so if this offends you, what I'm going to say, then you can always find another podcast that'll tell you what you want to hear or not give you the opinion. But abortion is a very powerful tool. And that is Lilith's little niche there. Big niche, actually. Millions and millions of babies are aborted every year. And it's a simple thing. I mean, you can avoid that if you just don't, if you just use protection. But people don't do that. They don't care. And they're of the opinion that, oh, well, it's no big deal. I'll just go and get rid of it if I don't want to keep it. So life has become very cheap. And that is what these entities depend on, is that you do this. Asmodeus, I believe, interfered with my friend Roger's marriage. My friend, he's my best friend. He died in December 3rd, 2011. Very good friend of mine, best friend. And him and his wife were having lots of problems. He was having a psychotic break, if that's what you want to call it. I think it's a spiritual thing. But he began to stalk her when she left him because he was becoming very threatening and doing all kinds of things. And it's said that when you read about Asmodeus, and there was a book written about it, a book written about demonology by Rosemary Ellen Guiley, the late author, Rosemary. And I had the book on my coffee table, and I was reading it at the time, off and on, and it was an encyclopedia of basically encyclopedia of demons. And like I said, the author was Rosemary Ellen Guiley, and Roger had unalived himself and taken his own life, and his wife had called me that very next morning. She was up in Colorado, and I was his best friend, and she told me that he had hung himself. I felt like he was under spiritual oppression big time. But it's said there in that book, too. You can read it. I mean, this is pretty common. He shows up in the Song of Solomon, Key of Solomon, and in particular the Lesser Key of Solomon, which is a Kralian book, right? And the 72 Goetian demons, which we talked about when we covered the Gypsy Rose case on Paranormal Roundtable, and Blondes and Booze and Bigfoot Michigan Rob's channel. 3-parter, which you were a part of, Rain. And we talked about these goetic demons and the lesser key of Solomon. One of the things that Asmodeus does is destroys marriages. He wrecks families. But he was obsessed with a woman named Sarah. And Roger's wife's name was Sarah. When I was sitting there just in shock about his unaliving himself, and I had just gotten off the phone, and Sarah truly did love him, and they were just his family was devastated. His son was my godson, and is my godson, and he came to live with us a couple years ago for a while, trying to help him get on his feet, get his life together. Then he moved back to Colorado after several months. But one of the things that I noticed was that the book was sitting right there in front of me, and I just looked at it, and I was like, I hadn't read it in a few days. So I picked it up, and I just opened it to the A's, and Asmodeus was the one that just popped right up. Like I opened it right to him.
Wow.
And so then I read what it said about him, which I already knew the gist of it, but I really got stuck on the part about he was obsessed with a woman named Sarah, who he had tormented in ancient Sumerian culture. Sara is a very common name in the Sumerian culture. And a lot of people don't know this, but Abraham, the father of the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, which, is the children of Israel. Really, that's two different things, but I'm not going to get into it. Israel, and then he fathered Christianity, and then later Islam. They all claim Abrahamic roots, right? Through Isaac, and then later his son Jacob, and then Joseph, and then all the way down to King David. But I read this, and Abraham and Sarah Wati, which was their names, they were Sumerians. So Sarah or Sada was a very popular name. And there was one woman named Sada who was tormented by this demon Asmodeus, who was obsessed with her. So it's funny that, not funny, haha, but funny, odd, that Roger he became super duper obsessed with his wife. I had never seen him act like that with her until like there toward the end. And he even had written a letter to her that I think if she would have gone over there to talk to him, it may have been a homicide-suicide, in my opinion. And I've told her this, and I think, because I think that that's what would have happened. I think that with him being as unstable as he was going to do it to himself, but when she didn't show up, I think he was going to do it with her too if she would have shown up. But, I think it was the die was already cast. He was going to do it. What's crazy to me is that he had tried and failed and said that he had seen God and that he was never going to kill himself, but then he did it anyway because the compulsion was so strong. So maybe he didn't have it in him to hurt her or his family, or maybe he did have it in him to hurt her. But this demon, which is really not a demon, it's an archon, who was enslaved by the ring of Solomon, the power of God. He was a very angry and malevolent spirit. Whereas when Visago, the third goetic demon that was taken, or archon, it is said that he is of a good nature, which is weird for that kind of whatever. But Asmodeus is just flat out known as a vulgar, violent, angry, defiant, rebellious angel, because that's literally what he is. He fell with Lucifer. He's a rebellious angel. So that might explain some of this. And I think that and Lilith, I think together, because like I said before, there's always like this one particular archon that'll break the opening to somebody, crack the crown, and then there is these secondary infections that come. We talked about that with Ed Gein. Like what could have caused him to have his break, and we said Beelzebub, possibly with the pestilence and the weird whatever. And then there was a couple other demons that may have came in. And now when I say these demons or archons, I'm not saying that it is them personally. I'm saying that it is part of their legions. They all have thousands of legions, right? Like literally, I think Visago has like 26,000. I don't know how many Asmodeus is. You could look it up, but he's got more because he's bigger, stronger, more powerful. And even though there's 72 of these archons that were enslaved along with their legions, and they go in order 1 through 72, that's only in order of how they were brought to heel or captured. So the earlier ones that were captured may have been weaker ones, honestly. We know that Ornius was the vampire demon that was feeding on the servant of Solomon's son, the servant of the servant's son of Solomon, and that's how he was captured. And then he ended up taking the word to these other entities and told them, we all have to go and answer to the son of David, which is Solomon. And then they became enslaved, and then they were used to build the temple, which was ripped when Christ was crucified. So that's an interesting thing. Now, I don't know if that is exactly what's going on with Chris Watts. We're speculating here. It may be, it may be not. It could be something worse, could be something less. I don't know.
Well, in the book with the letters that he wrote, he describes that he had started thinking about killing his family as this affair progressed, and it just seemed like his family just became like a nuisance to him, and it was getting in the way of this fantasy life he wanted with his mistress. And he says over and over he was thinking about it and he didn't want to, but he knew it was going to happen and that he couldn't explain it, that he felt like something was controlling him. And again, saying that doesn't mean that it excuses him at all from what he did.
And folks, we're going to have to talk about that next week. We will get into that as we continue talking about the Chris Watts case and we get more into it. And we will be playing the audio clips or the video clips of what these camera footage caught. So that and more will be next week on TCP, True Crime Paranormal. And I'll be back next week with my co-hosts, Rain, Madeline, and Nellie, as we go deep into this case. Thank you for listening. Good night.
Sitting here writing letters addressed to heaven. I pray you get them soon. Tears stain hearts and memories.